Okay, sorry about that. My phone cut out, so I'm going to have to pick up this recording where I was. So, from this little branch is absurdism. Now, absurdism says that the physical world around us, is random. Okay, which was very common among scientists at the time. That's a very big, and even today, if you don't have a particular worldview, more of a scientific worldview, that's a very common position for people to take. Now, Camus says that we also then, as humans, under absurdism, we try to create meaning. And this is what Freud said, Jacques Lacan, the late noted psychologist. This is what Deleuze and Guattari said later on. So this is also a current thread of thought that is still going on. And he's saying that we try to create our own meaning in everything. And that's why we create things such as we try to find points in maybe helping others or political parties or charities and all this stuff. And he says that all of this is our attempts to make sense of a random world. Now, he's saying that on a deeper level, he's not saying that any of this is bad. He does call this intellectual suicide, and he says if we realize the world is vapid and random, that there's physical suicide. But he is not arguing that suicide is ever an acceptable thing. He says instead that the absurd man for him, lives in the paradox of the two. That the things that he does, and he should do them, but they're forms of creating meaning that doesn't really exist, and that the world will not give us meaning. So instead, you're supposed to live in the middle, in a paradox, in the absurd man. And then he says that the absurd man living in this paradox should choose to be happy. The entire book, Myth of Sisyphus, is actually an argument against suicide. It's an argument about finding happiness in the world. I think a bunch of us miss that. It's about, in the misery, in the worst of times, you should find happiness. In fact, he even says, that's how he closes out the essay, imagine Sisyphus happy. In the very worst of punishments, find your happiness. And choose to be happy. It's not even really about finding happiness, because that implies a meaning. It's like, even if you don't have a meaning, still be happy. If you have a meaning, that's fine too, but if you don't, that's fine, be happy. And he says that there's only two real things there's one real thing and there's characteristics that grow out of it. And that is your own integrity. And he says this is the one truth, the one thing that everyone should be holding. And your integrity means that you're honest, you don't lie, you don't intentionally hurt people, you don't do any of these things. Now, here, let's talk about Rousseau and Sisyphus a little bit, and then we're going to talk about how to write this paper. Again, so Rousseau is not the absurd man. He's not in the text I gave you. Now, if you read the whole book, then you would get it, okay? That at the end, he becomes the absurd man right before he dies. So this idea of this emotionless, senseless, very cold persona, this is a reflection of a person that's in the process of becoming the absurd man, but is realizing that the world is void of meaning. And he's lost and he's desperate. This is not how Camus says we should live. This is, again, an example of a person that is growing and changing. And then you have Sisyphus, who is a terrible king, by the way. I mean, he steals stuff from the travelers, he plunders, he kills people. That's why he's being punished. So, he's saying that when Sisyphus was going through his life only living for himself, an example of maybe the intellectual suicide stuff, that is bad, that is hedonism, that he then gets punished, and then he realizes, while his punishment is there, that even in the very mundane things of doing something over and over and over again, you can be happy. And this changes his perspective on everything. That's the idea behind it. So the point here is we're not arguing for depression. We're not arguing for meaninglessness. Instead, he is recognizing what the world is on a deeper level. Now again, you don't have to agree with him. And this gets me to my other bigger point. A synthesis essay is not about disagreeing with the author. You can disagree with the author all you want to. In fact, I'd be disappointed if you didn't. You're supposed to disagree with them. That's the whole point of this, is you're supposed to think about it. But a synthesis essay is not you arguing with the dead author. It's not saying, I don't believe this. My opinion is this. That's not the point of it. The point is to see how one text informs and influences another text. How the philosophy of the myth of Sisyphus is expressed in the beginning chapters of The Stranger. How the stranger is an allegory or analogy of the philosophy of the myth of Sisyphus. So then you take here's what you would do. You would have an intro and a conclusion with a very clear thesis statement of, let's say, the absurd man is a good thesis statement. Let's see. We could say, the absurd man is the person living in paradox yet happy. And then you would show an illustration from the myth of Sisyphus from that argument about how maybe things are meaningless and void. Then you would show an example from The Stranger of Meursault where he's encountering the same thing. Then in your next paragraph, you may say, okay, from the myth of Sisyphus, we see Sisyphus being punished. Then you can go to Meursault, and if you've read the entire book, you can talk about his punishment. Or if you're just reading the section that I have, you can talk about the funeral and how that relates to that punishment. Then you can go to how Sisyphus becomes happy even in his punishment. And then you can go down to Meursault, and if you've read the entire book, you realize that at the end he realizes that you can be happy in life and still have no meaning or express that sentiment. In the book that we have, this happens kind of minorly as he leaves the funeral. Okay, it's a minor, it's subtle, but he is coming to the realization that he did love his mom, but he thought he was doing what was best for her, but he wasn't showing it outwardly because he didn't feel this super intensity, and he wasn't going to fake it for the society. And him not faking those emotions or faking his things was more important to him than keeping people comfortable. So what I'm dealing with here is I'm dealing with the text. I'm looking at one, then the other, each in a paragraph. Okay, one, then the other, one, then the other, one, then the other. Nowhere am I expressing I don't agree with Camus' philosophy, the absurd. There's a reason absurdism is not a common philosophy. It's not a common worldview that is not very popular. Yes, I would be disappointed if you didn't disagree with some elements of it. Yes, but when you're dealing with the philosophy, you're not dealing with the text. And the point of the essay is to deal with the text. So that's what we need to do. So I've opened up revisions for this essay. And when we do this, we need to go in and look at it and kind of see what the text is doing and stay centered on the text, not necessarily get distracted by all the other stuff that we read on Wikipedia or on Google, okay? So that's really what we need to do. And remember, it's only about 10 pages of The Stranger and only about 10 pages of the Myth of Sisyphus. So it's only about 20 pages. And I picked these because they align very, very well. This shows you how much of a nerd I am. I went down a Camus rabbit hole during my Christmas break and either read or listened to on Audible every single thing that he has ever written, and did a whole bunch of podcasts and lectures about him and about his writing. Of course, I had read him and studied him in college, but I wanted to explore more. So the thing that is really concerning me is that we are attributing to him philosophies that aren't his. Kind of shows that we haven't really fully understood the text, so we need to go back and revisit the text. And then we're dealing more in opinion instead of a formal academic essay. Remember, this is formal academic essay. This is college writing. So it's not an opinion, it's not a persuasive paper. It is where you're dealing with the ideas of the author, okay? And you're looking at how two pieces work together to create a unity of thought. Last time we looked at a piece of literature by two different authors, and we looked at similar themes. In this one, we're looking at pieces of literature by the same author, and we're looking at the same themes. It's a little bit different. It informs us a little bit differently. Very similar to the literary analysis, but a little different, okay? So I hope that helps. You get to redo it if you're not happy with your grade. So that's fine, because I know that some of you, you really are wanting that better grade, and that's perfectly fine. I'm grading them and getting them back, even the revisions. I've already started getting some in. So just get them to me as fast as you can, and we will see what we can do. I hope this helped. Thanks. Oh, and I will be on spring break next week, but I will be checking in on you guys. So never fear. Bye.